Some people just dream and join our company. Sorry, but someone wearing such a tacky suit can't just dream their way in here. On the day of my interview with the prestigious company I admired, I wore my grandfather's old suit. But the interviewer said that to me. It hit me like a harsh dose of reality, weighing me down heavily. Then, another interviewer noticed my watch and, with a surprised look, asked, "Why do you have that watch?" Through that watch, truths I never knew about myself began to unfold. My name is Daniel Davis, 23 years old. When I was young, my parents disappeared, leaving me with no family, so my grandfather took me in. My grandfather had also lost my grandmother and was alone, but he said he was very happy to have me. It may be cruel to say, but forget about your mom and dad. People who abandon a cute kid like you aren't real parents. I'll raise you with all my love. My grandfather welcomed me as family, saying this while hugging me tightly. Had anyone ever hugged me like that before? What? You drew a picture of me and Dad, Daniel. You're terrible at it. You need to draw better. My parents were never as loving as my grandfather was. Moreover, they were the kind of people who would leave me at home and get hooked on gambling. When they realized they didn't need me, they disappeared. At that time, I was convinced that I was an unnecessary person. But when my grandfather told me otherwise, I couldn't stop crying. I realized even someone like me deserved to live and exist. From then on, I became positive about everything, and I thoroughly enjoyed the life I shared with my grandfather. Until that day came. I'm off. Take care of the house, Daniel. Okay, take care. Let me know when you arrive. When I was a senior in high school, my grandfather had to go on a business trip. Since I had exams coming up, I stayed home to look after the house. Looking back, I regret not saying something more thoughtful. After hearing my response, my grandfather waved and left the house. I never imagined that would be the last time I'd see him. He should be coming back soon. 2 days later, after returning from school, I was relaxing in the living room, waiting for my grandfather to return from his trip. At that moment, I happened to turn on the TV and was immediately captivated by the news. A crash. The news was reporting a plane crash, showing footage of the scene. I was certain this was the flight my grandfather was supposed to be on for his return. In the next moment, I felt all the blood drain from my face. Could my grandfather have been involved in this plane crash? I quickly got ready and headed to the airport. I called my grandfather's cell phone, but there was no answer. No way, this can't be happening. My sense of foreboding grew stronger. I managed to get to the airport by taxi, but the atmosphere was tense and chaotic. Firefighters and medical personnel were rushing around, and I searched desperately for my grandfather. But there was no sign of him anywhere in the airport. Even the slight hope that he might not have been on the flight was dashed. And then the moment came. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. With a trembling hand, I answered the call, and it was the police. They reported that my grandfather's body had been found inside the plane. They asked me to identify the body, and in a daze, I made my unsteady way to the police station where his body was being held. I don't remember much of what happened after that. Maybe because I wanted to turn away from the harsh reality. Before I knew it, I was already at the morgue, facing my grandfather's body. These are the other personal effects. My condolences. The police officer who guided me lowered his head and left the room. The personal effects included my grandfather's driver's license, insurance card, and a watch. I didn't recognize the watch at all. According to the police officer, he had been holding it tightly with both hands as if to protect it. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant. But I thought it must have been something my grandfather cherished for a long time, so I took the watch. Tears flowed naturally. I vowed to cherish this watch from now on. After that, I continued my life without my grandfather. But I passed my high school exams, using that bitter experience as motivation, and got into the university I wanted. To support myself, I worked at a restaurant while attending college. The house I lived in with my grandfather was owned, so I managed the living expenses without rent. I relied on scholarships for my university fees. You're doing great, Daniel. Here, this is for you. What, really? Thank you, boss. Knowing my situation, my generous manager would often give me treats, and I managed my life without issues. Being treated so kindly reminded me of when my grandfather took me in. Feeling happy and grateful, I promised myself that one day I would repay my manager's kindness once I became a working adult. University life passed quickly, and I finally reached the point of interviewing with the prestigious company I admired. Come back anytime. I'm rooting for you. Boss, thank you for everything. Next time, I'll visit as a customer. I left the restaurant where I had worked all this time, promising to return as a customer someday. To take the first step toward fulfilling my dream, I decided to wear my grandfather's old suit for the interview. Looking at myself in the full-length mirror, I wasn't sure if I could pull off the suit, but I put on my grandfather's watch, the other memento. I've worn this watch every day since the day my grandfather passed away. Somehow, I felt like my grandfather was watching over me, and a smile crept across my face. Telling him that I would do my best today, I finished getting ready and left for the company's interview location. When you are called, please knock and enter. Understood. When I arrived, a woman told us to wait outside the interview room. Being a prestigious company, there were many other candidates besides me. As I sensed that everyone had their reasons for being here, I suddenly made eye contact with a man who seemed to be an interviewer about to enter the room. The next moment, his gaze fell on my suit. Are you really going to take the interview in that old, worn-out suit? What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he said, and a stupid voice escaped my mouth. It must have been quite amusing to him. The interviewer who spoke to me started laughing loudly. So, you're really going to take the interview in that raggedy suit? What a rude person, I thought as I looked at the name tag on his chest, which read Thomas Williams. I frowned at his behavior. I did take good care of it. Even so, who wears such an old shabby suit these days? You're definitely going to fail the interview, man. Laughing loudly, Thomas Williams walked into the interview room. The thought of being judged by someone who mocks others made me anxious. While waiting for my name to be called, I felt a surge of frustration and kept my head down. Then, I noticed my grandfather's watch on my wrist. Seeing that watch somehow calmed me down. I also felt a growing sense of courage. It was as if my grandfather was telling me not to worry about what that interviewer said. With that in mind, I decided to change my mindset and go through with the interview. Daniel Davis, please come in. Hearing the interviewer's voice from the room, I stood up and cheerfully responded as I entered. Excuse me. I walked in with slightly nervous steps. Waiting inside were Thomas Williams, who had mocked my grandfather's suit earlier, and an older interviewer. The name tag on the older interviewer's chest read, James Brown. Please have a seat over there, said James with a friendly smile, pointing to a chair opposite them. Feeling a bit relieved that James didn't seem like Thomas, I replied and sat down. First, please introduce yourself. Following James's instructions, I began my self-introduction. I tried to answer clearly, but Thomas's attitude kept bothering me. Since I entered the room, he hadn't made eye contact or seemed to be listening, just skimming through my resume. It was as if he didn't care about me at all. Trying to ignore this, I finished my introduction and moved on to explaining my motivation for applying. And just as I was about to explain my motivation for applying, it's probably because we're a famous big company, right? What? I couldn't believe Thomas's presumptuous words, especially during an interview. Some people just dream and try to join our company. Sorry, but someone wearing such a tacky suit can't just dream their way in here. Thomas. James seemed puzzled by Thomas's comment. However, Thomas didn't seem to have any intention of changing his attitude, as if he always behaved this way. I'm just teaching him the harsh reality of the world. By the way, that suit looks quite vintage and charming. Did you inherit it from someone? Ignoring Thomas, James shifted the conversation and asked me. Although Thomas's words had shaken me, James's intervention brought me relief. Yes, actually, this suit is a keepsake from my grandfather. He told me to wear it for interviews. Oh, your grandfather. James murmured this and stared intently at my suit. Noticing the watch I was wearing, his eyes widened in surprise. Why do you have that watch? What? His surprise startled me, but I realized he was referring to the watch I was wearing. This is also my grandfather's keepsake. He was holding it tightly until his death in a plane crash. I see. You are Roberts? James unexpectedly mentioned my grandfather's name, which shocked me. How do you know my grandfather's name? This is quite a coincidence. I was your grandfather's classmate. I was further astonished by this sudden revelation. I couldn't believe that James was my grandfather's classmate. But how did you recognize the watch as my grandfather's? Now, we're in the middle of an interview. Save your grandfather's stories for later. Thomas interrupted. Thomas, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up in frustration. But James intervened. I'll allow it. As long as it's brief, it shouldn't be a problem. What? Seriously? It seemed James outranked Thomas, who reluctantly shrugged his shoulders in defeat. James then turned his gaze back to me with a slight smile. That watch wasn't meant for him. It was meant for you, Daniel. For me? What do you mean? I was stunned to learn that the watch, which I thought was a keepsake from my grandfather, was actually intended as a gift for me. I had always believed it was something my grandfather cherished for himself, but that turned out not to be the case. My family owns a watch shop. Your grandfather contacted me saying he wanted to gift a watch to his grandson entering college. James, who worked at this company, had taken a leave to visit his family's watch shop. He asked his father, who still ran the shop, to make a custom watch. That watch is one of a kind. I recognized it immediately. When I last saw your grandfather at our shop, he seemed so healthy. I can't believe he got caught in that crash afterward. It seemed that after finishing his business trip, my grandfather had stopped by James's family watch shop to pick up this watch. Learning everything, there was a moment of silence between us, but I broke it first. I always thought it was my grandfather's keepsake, but knowing he was thinking of me even before he passed away makes me happy. And this watch is truly one of a kind. James, who had been mourning my grandfather, seemed to brighten up a bit at my positive words. Perhaps my grandfather brought us together to convey this message. That might be the case. We nodded in agreement. Thomas, however, looked bored and clicked his tongue. Are we done here? I never expected to hear such a story during an interview. It was because I brought it up first. James quickly interjected, but Thomas wasn't listening. You're too soft, James, allowing this guy extra time while others are waiting for their interview. Thomas now turned his criticism toward James, and then pointed his finger at me. You need to leave this room immediately. You're not getting hired anyway. If that's how you feel, I have a plan as well. What? James then pulled something out from inside his suit and showed it. It was a voice recorder. James, what is that? Actually, many people have complained about being subjected to hostile interviews by you, so I brought this voice recorder. So that's why you suddenly joined the interview panel this time. Thomas started to sweat, realizing the gravity of the situation. Yet, he still managed a defiant smile. Did you get any proof of my hostile interviews? It was mostly you and Daniel talking, wasn't it? I've been recording since before you entered this room. I clearly remember you mocking Daniel's suit and saying he would fail the interview, right? James pressed Thomas angrily. The sight of James towering over Thomas was intimidating. The interview had turned into something else entirely, and I gulped, wondering what would happen next. No, I didn't mean it as a hostile interview. I was just trying to test their resilience. And how exactly does verbal abuse test resilience? Is it necessary to push people to the brink? James's stern voice cornered Thomas further. In any case, this recording will be submitted to the higher-ups. The president will decide directly. No way. If he didn't want this to happen, he shouldn't have conducted hostile interviews in the first place. Testing resilience doesn't justify pushing interviewees to their limits. I agreed with James's perspective. Daniel, I'm sorry about this. Shall we continue the interview? Yes. I responded energetically to James's words and began to explain my motivation for applying. Thomas was practically invisible, merely a bystander listening to the interview. A few days later, I received an email confirming my successful interview, and I couldn't help but jump for joy. I did it. I got the job. Despite my worries, I secured the job at the prestigious company and couldn't resist a triumphant fist pump. I got the job, Grandpa. It's all thanks to your keepsakes. I reported my successful employment to my grandfather at the family altar. As for Thomas, who had conducted the hostile interviews, James submitted the victims' reports and the voice recorder to the president, who then summoned Thomas to his office. You're fired. You caused this issue just after being promoted to manager. You've let it go to your head. President, please, reconsider. Thomas pleaded with the president, unhappy with the decision. But the president dismissed his plea. We have numerous reports from victims. We have to pay them compensation, and we'll be billing you for it. No way. Thomas was overwhelmed when presented with the compiled reports by James. Your firing is inevitable, but if you apologize to each victim personally, some might forgive you and withdraw their claims. That could reduce the amount you owe. I'll go right away. Taking the president's advice, Thomas dashed out of the company. James was nearby, but Thomas didn't even glance at him as he took the documents and left. President, why did you do that? He wouldn't go and apologize to the victims otherwise. At least he has to apologize. Still, the way he jumped at the chance just because I mentioned it might reduce the compensation amount was surprising. The president said with a sigh. James also gave a troubled smile. I'm very sorry for what happened. Thomas really did go around apologizing to each victim, using the list James had compiled. Some accepted his apology and withdrew their claims, but most did not. It's only natural to apologize when you've done something wrong. The fact that Thomas was apologizing only to reduce the compensation amount shows his questionable character. Thomas needs to reflect on himself. Afterward, he was fired from the company and found a new job, but I heard he conducted hostile interviews at his previous company. A victim of Thomas's hostile interviews ended up working at the same new company, and the rumors about his misconduct spread quickly. Thomas now works while carrying the burden of paying compensation, feeling marginalized. A week after the interview, I met James at a park on a company holiday. Sorry, did you wait long? No, I just got here myself. Thank you for coming today. James arrived at the meeting place, slightly out of breath, holding a bouquet of chrysanthemums. We were meeting to visit my grandfather's grave together. I still remember reuniting with Robert like it was yesterday. When he realized the plane was crashing, he held onto the watch tightly, hoping it would safely reach you, Daniel. James said this as if speaking directly to my grandfather in front of his grave. He then placed the bouquet in the vase by the grave. I'm sure my grandfather is happy you came. I usually come alone. Please invite me from now on. Of course. We promised to come together for future visits. I felt like my grandfather was pleased. Starting this spring, you'll be working at our company. It might be tough at first, but hang in there. My job at the prestigious company was set to begin in spring. Later, I learned that James was actually the senior executive vice president. Knowing this, his words of encouragement motivated me even more. Yes, I'll do my best. I didn't know if I could meet James's expectations, but I was determined to give my all to the job. If you'd like, how about we go eat at the restaurant where I used to work part-time? That sounds great. Let's go. With that, we finished our visit to the grave and left. At that moment, I had a new goal in mind. I secretly aspired to become a boss like James someday, as we headed to the restaurant together.